Hello. Before we start the podcast, I just wanted to take the opportunity to thank all the amazing guests and you, our listeners, for your support over the last 4 years. What started as a way to work through the uncertainties of the pandemic has become one of SEPA's key communications platforms. This is an extra special anniversary episode of Two IPs in a Pod. So sit back and enjoy me and Gwilym chatting with Steve Rowan, Vice President for the patent granting process at the European Patent Office. On with the show.
Hello, it's so nice to be sat next to me.
We've had to budget up.
Yeah.
Good balance on my phone.
Do you know where we are? You're in the right square.
I am now. I told you I was parked outside, just the wrong outside.
Yeah. It's when I announced everyone. It's right, Gwilym is outside. 7 minutes later, walk through the door. So we're in the SCI offices in Belgravia because we've got a big day today. In fact, the day would have happened by the time the podcast goes out.
So we will have had a big day.
We would have had a big day, but we're going to record a couple of podcasts in advance of our big day.
Yeah.
Should we talk a little bit about the big day, then?
Can I just talk about your tea first?
Talk about my tea.
You made me a lovely cup of tea.
Was it all right?
Yeah, it was classy. Good. It's nice and strong.
Yeah.
Just the right amount of milk. You were given a teacup. Don't like teacup. Not your fault. Can't blame you.
No, neither bug, don't you?
The vessel's all wrong, but you know.
Yeah.
You did what you could with what was given to you, so thank you. It's a great cup of tea.
That's the story of my podcasting career, is doing what I can with what's given to me.
You've done a remarkable job given what little there was.
If you say so yourself.
Thank you. Right, carry on.
Yeah, so in Belgravia, this evening we've got a rather fantastic event with some of the UK's leading judges.
Well, all of them.
All of the UK's leading judges.
Yeah.
And a big number of our members.
All of them?
Well, not all of them, but
the two of you who are listening who weren't there. Sorry.
but we're going to get like about 6-7% of our fellows, which is quite good, isn't it? That's a decent turnout. And we're going to talk about all things UK litigation. And
No,
we're not.
not the litigation. That's the whole thing. This is about
I
I
always get this wrong. This is the gig that you guys do.
the
isn't it?
workers.
Yeah, the proper patent people.
Yeah. So prosecution and drafting.
Yeah.
Because all the litigants get to talk to the judges all the time.
All the time. Yeah.
Mostly in court, obviously fighting their cases. It's amazing how the judges all. I mean, we just dropped them a line saying we'd love to have this.
How did this come about?
I had breakfast with Sir Colin Burse.
As you do.
Yeah, and we just talked about it, and he said, of course we'll support. He said he could do it, and I just contacted all the other ones, and everyone said yes, it was incredible.
That's all your engineering, mate. Well done.
I'm not going to host it, and I'm kind of thinking, I'm a bit scared. But there we go.
Yeah, you'll be fine. Should we crack on with the podcast? Do you want anything else to talk about, or should we crack on with the podcast?
Let's go.
Lee Davis and Gwilym Roberts are the Two IPs in a Pod, and you are listening to a podcast on intellectual property, brought to you by the Chartered Institute of Patent Attorneys.
So we have Steve Rowan with us today for the second time on the podcast from the EPO. Steve, hello, how are you?
Hi, very good to be here in person.
In person, last time you were hidden behind a screen, as we all were, because we were kind of deep into COVID, weren't we? So it's lovely to have you with us. And it's quite nice that you're being allowed out of the EPO's offshoot again. Yeah, it's been quite difficult to get you guys to move around the world these days, isn't it?
I seem to be travelling quite a lot lately. I was here for the SEPA Presidents.
You were, yeah. But it's same venue.
Same venue,
yeah. And you've come back today to spend some time with us with our little judges event this evening. So we thought that we would grab you and get you on the podcast. So thanks for agreeing to do that. And it's quite nice that you've got a minder with you. We probably shouldn't say too much about that, but you do have someone to look after you to make sure you don't say the wrong things.
He's quite threatening, isn't he?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. It's you got side eyes then. Side eyes. So who's driving? Are you driving this one? Or,
Steve's driving.
Steve's driving.
Yeah,
Steve's
so
driving.
we can sit back and Steve. No, I'm joking. I'm happy to kick off by saying what is EPO I think we need to know, because you guys are doing loads and loads, we're seeing loads of mail shots, all kinds of things. What are your top topics for us?
Well, I think the Unity patent has obviously taken off in a big way. And what we see, I just checked actually just now, because every day obviously we get more and more cases coming through. So nearly 25,000 patents have now been elected to go for unitary effect. And I think that's a really big take up. I mean, it's one of the things when I was sort of working on the UK side, we always said, this system is going to be really good for SMEs. It's really going to reduce cost. It's going to reduce complexity. And the really positive element of it is not only do we see around sort of 24% of patents going through that route now, we see a really high take-up of SMEs. So that element of the reduction of costs for SMEs is really, really coming through. And out of that 25,000, we see around 1,000 coming from the UK.
Of course, so there is a big UK participation in this.
Yeah, definitely. We see it predominantly coming from Europe at the moment. So we see about 65.5% of all the unitary patents coming from Europe. Particularly Siemens is up there as one of the top users. It was quite interesting. We had a meeting with AIPLA, and they said, "Oh, we're sort of sitting back," because when we had a chat with our European counterparts, they said, "Oh, this unitary patent, let's see how it plays out. We're not necessarily going to go for it." And when we actually disclosed the figures, they were like, "What? So actually, European business is going for it?" So we said, "Yeah, in a big way." So I think one of the main things is obviously making sure that those outside, particularly from Asia as well as from America, are aware of this new right. And I think that's where SEPA members really come in, because obviously SEPA members really punch above their weight with regard to representation before us. I think it's about 19% of the applications we receive have SEPA representation. So I think the SEPA, EPI, and other representative bodies across Europe have a really big role to play, making sure that users outside Europe are aware of this new right.
Lots of stats there. Lots of stats. Stat one. Because I corroborate with what I've heard, which is you're granting about 100,000 cases a year, which is a lot. That's going to come up this evening, by the way, because they're not only 1% of those litigated, but nearly 99,000. Apart from that. So that's the culture, as you said, of the whole input that's coming out as UPC. That's probably against what a lot of the pessimists, at least, were saying before this all happens. A pretty rapid turnaround. Quick question on that, and it may be impossible to answer actually. So sorry. Obviously, there was a bit of a backlog stored up. It's like a roller, wasn't it? Because a lot of people were deferring grant for probably a year or two. So, is it possible that maybe in a year's time it'll stabilise at a different number? Or
no? Well, I mean, what there was the sunrise period, but that was actually relatively a short period, and we didn't see too many people making use of that. We did see some use of it. If we look at last year's figures, so the 104,000 patents we granted last year, we see about a 17% conversion rate. That includes that sunrise period. So obviously from June onwards, we saw much higher rates, but over the whole year, we see a 17%. Now, since January, we're up at around 23% conversion. So the trend is growing, and we see that with the number of applications coming. Obviously, we've got the dashboard out there. That's really popular. So you can look by country, you can look by applicant. You can really see the people that are using this new right.
And next, stat two. 2/3 European take up. I've got 1,000 out of 25,000, so it's been at 4% UK take up. Good at this maths. So the Europeans have jumped on it, and maybe not surprising, they come back to courts and all the other aspects of it. You mentioned Asia, pretty least interested. I think traditionally there's quite a conservative approach to legal things, so that kind of makes sense. US is one where perhaps there's a lot of attention required then, because they're quite a significant filer at the EP, aren't they?
Yeah, they're very large. After Germany, they're our second largest filer.
Yeah.
As you know, most of the European patent office is slightly different to most other patent offices in that the majority of the applications actually come from outside what might be termed the host country or host region. And it was just interesting when we met APLA, which is always one of those so many acronyms in IP. When we met them, they said they were also sort of saying, "Oh well, we're sort of thinking about it. Maybe we will jump on it." Same as you said with when we met the Japanese attorneys, they were saying, "Yes, our clients are really thinking about it." Same when we met Japanese industry, but they have started to use it, but not in such great numbers.
But I think as the numbers increase on use of UP, and I guess the UPC starts to hopefully prove itself as a safe pair of hands legal, which so far I gather it is. I guess that number's going to go up. The other interesting stat I heard, I don't know if we can count this, was opt-ins or withdrawal of opt-outs. Apparently that's happening. I don't know how you track that, but anecdotally I've heard that as well.
Yeah, I mean, that's another interesting thing where what we saw, not surprisingly, was quite a lot of companies basically looking at their portfolio, and then people took different decisions. Some companies opted out what they store as their crown jewels, and in meetings that we've had with them, they said that. They said, "Look, we were unsure about this system. We've opted out our crown jewels, but we might well opt those back in again." Obviously, it's a sort of a one-time choice. So Other people were like, no, we're absolutely going for this, and we're going to sort of put all of our eggs in one basket. So as you say, I think the Unified Patent Court is something which is kicking off now. We're starting to see those cases coming through. It's something that we're monitoring very carefully because obviously we monitor the Board of Appeal decisions, and we'll also be looking at those decisions coming out of the Unified Patent Court because, like you said, such a small percentage of cases ever get through to Boards of Appeal, the new Unified Patent Court, or indeed national courts. That we can then really look at them when they come through.
Do you see a time when the unitary patent becomes the core of the EPO's business?
I think, as Gwilym said, it's exceeded all expectation. We thought there would be quite a slow take-up. We were really surprised by the figures. Certainly as far as, for those patents which are patented in the European Union, it's becoming obviously a key element. And I think as well, in the conversations that we've been having with our users, and I'm sure you've been having with your clients, we see that they are seeing it as a benefit. So, whereas maybe before they would have patented and validated in maybe 2 or 3 countries of the European Union, I can see that they will be patenting more using that unitary patent. And we also see some member states obviously starting to take up. So we've already had information that another country will join shortly. And obviously the Irish referendum has been pushed back slightly. But again, we're expecting Ireland to obviously do the referendum on them joining. So obviously the goal then is that we would reach out to the whole of the European Union eventually.
We had that chat with Lee and I about Kevin Mooney not that long ago.
We did, yeah.
We did one of the architects of the whole system. Obviously, he was disappointed around the lack of UK involvement at the coalface these days. But actually, I know quite a few firms, we've been doing some studies on this, but a few UK firms are using their representation rights.
Certainly on the litigation side.
Yeah, which is great news, actually. So the CEPA's been working really hard on it.
But yeah, I think we have a UPC task force. We're spreading the word and as far as we can. And you and I are off to Inter to take 2 ideas and pod there. And I know a big part of that is spreading the word about the UK's role in the UPC. Is it? Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Excellent. Let's stop doing that then. Good. We went in a bit hard though, didn't we? Straight into the heavy stats on UPC.
Yeah.
Sorry, Steve. How's things going? How are you?
Very well, thank you.
Good.
And very good to be back in the UK.
You're well settled into the Netherlands now, I guess.
Yes, 5.5 years now. So it's, and I think, in general, really settled there. Also with the family, I think that's one of the things you see with an international organisation. All of those people coming, we recruit a lot of people in every year. I always do the introductory talk, and I always say to them, look, it's not just about you. You're working, so you're going out to work. You're getting to grips with the European Patent Office. Also think about your partners and children because they've also been uprooted from their schools, from their jobs, and now they're in a completely different country. So I think it's one of those elements with an international organisation where it's also important that the families also settle in, and that's where the EPO has an Amicale group, and there's basically a club for everything, and the families are encouraged then to also take part in those clubs.
That's actually cool, isn't it? You've got community club at CEPA. We don't really talk to each other.
But it's a bit unusual dynamic. I like that. Like I turn to the side and you're there.
I was going to ask another worky one though.
Don't have that.
So disappointed to come to you. Sorry about that. Actually, it kind of ties into that last point though about people come from all over Europe anyway to do it, and we've talked about this before in other fora about kind of there used to be a very strong British contingent working to examine the level and everywhere else at the EPO, and over the years that maybe diminished a bit. What do you think about that? And should we be changing it?
I think in general, if we look at the EPO, it's 39 member states. We currently have 34 of those represented. There's no obviously target to have a certain representation from each country. We have in the latest strategic plan said we'd like to have at least one colleague from every single member state. And I think if we look at the general numbers, I think with the expansion of the EPO, when we think, it started off, UK was one of the founding members, quite a small group. The organisation was quite small. We were then, therefore, quite a big part of that. I think now, if we look with all of the member states that we have, there's still quite a good representation from the UK, including at senior levels. And one of the things, obviously, we want to try and do, and one of my roles, as well as being vice president of patent granting, is diversity and inclusion champion, and to really try and make sure that we reach out and get the very best people We're really trying to increase the number of women we're getting in by reaching out to various career fairs, which are targeted more at women in STEM roles. Also then obviously looking at LGBTQ plus as well, so looking at the way in which we try and recruit there, and we've just amended some of our internal mechanisms regarding partnership, and we're looking at parenthood now. But I think the other element is really trying to get those young people interested, and we've got the Young Professional Programme, so it's the Pan-European SEAL Young Professional Programme, and that's massively increased the range of people we're getting. So we're recruiting maybe from less traditional universities, and also from a wider range of member states
That's
as well.
tough work, though, isn't it? I mean, we try and do it on the patent side in the UK. It's a tough gig trying to engage with universities, and but they've got their own issues in terms of addressing diversity and inclusion. So we're sort of one step removed from the work that they're doing, and we're trying to influence there. Not easy.
No, I think the element obviously we offer is a first contract. So it's a 1-year contract followed by another 2 years. So 3 years first employment contract in an amazing international organization. And we also cover all the different elements. So you might come in and do HR, you might come in and do comms,
Sure.
or you might come in and become trained to do the patent examiner job. So it's proved very, very successful. We've also been able to expand it. Before they weren't employees, and so given Dutch employment law, we couldn't really have an internship. So they've now been made employees, and so therefore we now have the first batch in the Netherlands. And it's great to see, as I said, those people coming in. We have a much higher percentage of women in that group as well, which again has helped us to really try and start addressing that issue. But the issue of women representation in STEM roles applies in profession, it applies in patent offices, but it also applies in inventors.
Yeah.
Women are still underrepresented in that category.
I think it was working at the EPO as an examiner in particular. I thought it was daunting at jobs because you've got to be technically highly qualified, legally highly qualified, and trilingual. So we have a list of requirements, and also in the past you'd have to go and basically fully emigrate. But I think that, am I right in thinking the language? There's a lot more there's a lot of training these days in language, and a lot more freedom of movement as well.
Yeah, the language requirements have been relaxed slightly. The aim is that all examiners will still be fully fluent in the 3 languages, but they get a longer time to do so. So we have the 5-year contract before people are made permanent. So they're employed for 5 years, then another 5 years. And during that period, we run intensive training courses to bring them up to speed in whichever language they need to do so. And then with the new ways of working, you still have a base country. So my base country is still the Netherlands, but I can work up to 60 days outside of the Netherlands in that period. And I think that has also, again, talking about people coming over with their families, they obviously leave elements of their family back, sometimes elderly parents. And so that's really proved very popular with people to be able to then spend some more time back with their parents when they need them.
That's quite attractive. And I think actually a bit more small talk. Yeah, talking the languages, how's your Dutch?
Oh, erg goed.
Actually,
Spreek je Nederlands? Yeah.
No, you think apparently you just got to add a diminutive to any word and you don't have to know gender or something.
Yeah, well, one of the difficulties with Dutch, there are lots of difficulties with Dutch because everyone speaks such good English, but one of the real difficulties is knowing whether it's a der word or het. There are 2 words for the. If you make things diminutive, it's always het. So lots of people learning Dutch just refer to everything like biertje. You don't ask for a beer, you ask for a small beer, and then you don't need to remember whether it's der beer or het beer. You just say het biertje.
Yeah, and you can also count one person you want to see, so you can say 6 small beers and still deal with the problem of a large beer. Just a lot of class work.
You always get the big head though on Dutch beers, so and every beer is small anyway.
I was there recently, yeah, and the very British thing, I'm being undercharged here. What's going on with all this froth? Yeah, I refuse to pay for froth.
do you?
Does it not make you cross when you go to the pub?
Not particularly, no. It's
No, I get
never
quite
bothered
stressed.
me.
Really?
Never bothered me.
Oh, well, it's £7 a pint. Fight for your liquid.
No, never bothered
Well,
me.
you're from Spoon's generation, I'm right, as producers. £7 a pint, what they're talking about, it's madness.
Well, you need to come to Wales, Gwyneth, because I almost got into trouble with the barman in Newport, where I ordered 5 pints, and he said, "Oh, that's £13 something," and I said, "No, I ordered 5 pints."
Yeah.
At which point he said, "Are you being funny?" Because of course he charged me the correct amount for 5 pints, whereas based on prices in London or indeed The Hague.
Yeah,
I was
that's a
expecting
mortgage.
two drinks,
Yeah.
two drinks for £13.
Right.
But,
To pay installments, £5. But also talking about kind of the freedom of movement and the way you guys can now move around and visit family and stay away and stuff. That must presumably be one of the beneficiaries, one of the results of the video conferencing move and the shift we've seen now to much more Vico.
yeah, I think obviously the pandemic drove it. I think, if we look at all organisations, there were many roles that people said this has to be done in person, this can't be done remotely. And of course, the pandemic proved that, yes, you can get by in most areas. Some things are better done in person. Other things you can do perfectly well online. That's really driven that move to having people working remotely. Of course, it's also true to say that we had quite a few people working from home before, so it wasn't completely new. What was new was that element that everyone realised they could do so. And of course, we saw then that the vast majority of staff, the vast majority of staff are now making use. Even those people who said, actually, I'd rather be in the office, great. Mm-hmm. But then, when the plumber's coming around, yes, they'll work from home that day and make use of the flexibility.
It's the first time on the podcast that someone other than Lee.
But specifically on the oral proceedings by Vico, again, I think it's really opened things up. And we see that with representatives. I think, we have very strong feedback from applicants, particularly those in America and Asia, that say, yeah, now we can actually sit in on these proceedings. And of course, we also see for big cases like Board of Appeal, you see thousands of people logging on so that they can actually observe those proceedings. Yeah, wow. for the big Board of Appeal cases. And I think it's that element as well about using it for training. Whereas before, maybe one or two people would have come along to see oral proceedings, they can now see them in action.
I think, Steve, we were always fans of Vico. From the beginning.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, because we invested quite a lot in training early doors, didn't we?
Well, I think it did seem like the right thing, and it seemed a step forward. And there was obviously quite a big pushback at the beginning from a whole bunch of different voices. How is the pushback now?
We tracked that. So we tracked the cases where people said, no, we really want these proceedings to be in person, and they've fallen off completely. It is important to say that we do have oral proceedings in person. There was a case recently involving a fire engine. So the fire engine actually came to the site, so it was necessary to inspect the fire engine, which obviously can't be done online. When necessary, we have them, but for the vast majority of cases, it's really proving to be a very good forum to be able to get access to justice for everyone.
I mean, whoever brings the fire engine has to win the case, don't they? I mean, surely you're just working a little bit harder than the other team. Bringing up an emergency vehicle.
Just what bit of IP in a fire engine would have been tested?
I don't know what type that was, but we did put out a notice for staff just in case they were a bit concerned when they saw a fire engine pulling up to the ESAR building.
Yes, yeah, lots of them.
They've been around for a while. Those things listed as a bell. Oh, it could be an invented step ladder. I'm learning.
That's good. Obviously, an appeal, which I know isn't directly your problem, but it's still more happening more in appeal. But it seems to be shaking down there to when it's useful and when it kind of merits the in-person attendance.
Yeah, I think obviously, as you said, the Boards of Appeal are independent, but I know that they also have, because they use our facilities, they've also invested in hybrid facilities. So where the party really wants to make a representation but doesn't want to be physically present, there's also that possibility as well of having the hybrid, whereas we have said it's either on site or it's entirely Vico. The Board of Appeal have those different options as well.
Yeah, hybrid always seems difficult, and not because it necessarily favours the people in the room. I've been in hybrid meetings, where you forget there are people in the room and focus on the screen. It's just the differential that's the problem rather than anyone winning. So
when I was in the UK office, because of course the UK office went over to Vico proceedings very early because of the move down from London to Wales, and the hybrid happened quite frequently. Again, where a party really said, well, unless we have hybrid, we basically can't be represented because maybe they couldn't afford to pay for the representative to travel, and particularly also for cross-examination of witnesses as well. You've got a witness in America, maybe they're only needed for half an hour. It does mean then that you can have that cross-examination without the expense.
I've not heard anyone complaining about it, except maybe missing the old trip to Munich with the briefcase in your hand and your suit. and you added a personal soundtrack as I came off the aeroplane. So the pro coming in to fix things. It's quite cool. It's like the Reservoir Dogs.
Does that goes on in your head, does it?
Do you have a soundtrack?
No.
Yeah, absolutely. Anyway, we'll come on to my soundtrack, I'm sure. So we talked about the stats a bit earlier on. You've got that new portal that seems to have vast amounts of information on it. Do you want to talk us through that for a moment?
Which part, the sort of general stats or the deep tech finder?
Oh, deep tech finder. Deep tech finder.
So I think one of the elements that it was in the strategic plan. Antonio's first strategic plan was to look at the fact we have like 153 million patent documents, but in fact, to most people, they're completely impenetrable unless you're a patent searcher or a patent attorney or a patent examiner. Most people really can't go through that, even though we make all of that available through Espasinet, etc. It's really difficult to navigate. And so during the pandemic, then we started developing these platforms. So we put in pre-loaded search criteria. So our examiners said, if you want to examine diagnostics on COVID, here's all the patents around diagnostics on COVID. Here's all the patents around preventative measures, etc. And these then, we've got one now on fire, tackling wildfires. We've got one now on cancer treatment. And then as part of that, as part of the launch of the observatory last year, we just thought, why don't we look at all of those SMEs and micro enterprises that are using the European patent system and try and map them? So it's a fully interactive map. It's called the Deep Tech Finder. It's available on the website. Basically, you can look by country, you can look by technology. It doesn't cover all technologies yet. We're expanding it into the different technologies. But then it brings up, for example, all of the SMEs in the UK which are interested in hydrolyzers for hydrogen production. You can click on them, you can see where they're based, you can see what their investment profile is. So it combines various different data sets. One of the interesting things, which is very positive, is that the UK has the largest number of entries on the Deep Tech Finder out of Europe. So I think it's showing, obviously, that our micro enterprises and SMEs are really using the patent system. There is a bit of a question like, well, maybe they're there because they're not then growing. Because, of course, once they grow and they get over a certain size, they disappear out of this database. But I think it's proving very useful at matching. One of the difficulties, obviously, is always matching that investment with the invention. So it's giving investors a real insight into what innovation is going on.
I was going to ask you the audience was actually, because that's always interesting. It always interests me when patent offices branch out from granting patents to Article 1 EPC, I think, isn't it? That's what the job is. But I think EPO has always had a kind of a wider remit in terms of the economic side. So you're looking to educate investors, presumably businesses looking for niches or ways forward, and maybe patent attorneys. But who's your key audience?
I think this is, again, we're very conscious of our role. Like you said, the primary role is to grow high quality patents. But we were very conscious as well that we were sitting on this huge wealth of information. And, like I said, with Antonio, he said he wanted to change all that information into knowledge, so something that could actually be used. And this database was basically bringing together all those parts of knowledge. And then, like you said, it's for a number of people to use. It's also one of the elements we're also doing with these reports is trying to inform policymakers.
Yeah.
Again, because we're a technical organization, we're not a policy organization. But if we can inform the national authorities, if we can inform the European Commission about where these inventions are happening, we're also doing a lot of work at the moment with the European Innovation Council, which is really interesting because it's much broader than Europe. It includes the UK, it even includes New Zealand for some elements, and it also includes Turkey. And again, trying to make sure then that we're providing people with the information then that they can make informed choices.
But none of this to the detriment of quality at the European Patent Office. I'm on two working groups. I'm on the rules one, working party, working summary, and also the quality one. And I think we talked about this before on podcasts, but discussions about quality at the EPO. We'd have to go into maybe what you're getting, but I think the feedback we get from our profession consistently is that it's a good patent office. Yeah, good patents. We get the patent we want, but that's their job.
I think we're very conscious that we have a high reputation for quality, and we want to keep that. So we do also listen. I mean, if when you come to the Working Party on Quality, you'll see that two elements that came out last year was that people said you're not always consistent in the way you deal with third-party observations. So we've taken that away. we've done a study of every single third-party observation filed last year, and we'll present the findings to the working party, SACIPA working party on quality, and then discuss what we should do about that. We did something similar the year before, where again, the comment was you're not very consistent when you want to bring the description into line with the claims. Some areas were being more stringent about that, others were being less so. So again, we did a review. Yeah, we were inconsistent. So we're doing the training. The other thing we're doing next year, which I'm sure members will be interested in, is later in the year we're going to do a workshop, not a working party, but a workshop on clarity. So that was the other element that came out from the stakeholder quality assurance panels. They were saying that the approach to clarity, some people were being stricter, some people were being less so. Equally, of course, clarity comes from the drafting. So therefore, it's partly.
Oh, it's the pattern attorney's fault then, is it? If only there was going to be an event looking at kind of drafting and
With
that'd
experts,
be really
please, that'd be, But actually, all three of those topics, but risking a bit super pattern certainly, are really interesting. Third party observations, are you familiar with those?
No, go tell me about that.
So third party observations are the best way you can do something about a pattern before it's drafted. If you don't
Clearly, I know what a third party is and I know what an observation is.
You put them together, that's it. Well, that's it, yeah. But no, the third party one's quite important because it means that anyone can put it in, but you don't become party to the proceedings. So if you want to stop having it granted and you happen to know about a really good piece of prior art, you bang it in as a third party.
So yeah, I know about this.
That's it. And then, but I mean, it can be anonymous, which means that it's quite an important tool. But every time we ever are asked to advise on it, we're always slightly anecdotal because it's all about our experience with it. So I think that level is really useful because our normal stories are sometimes quite useful, but you need to have a bang on piece of prior art, whatever it might be. So I think that the feedback from that is the sort of thing a profession will leap on actually and share because it's slightly less subjective. That was interesting. Description amendment, obviously a very popular topic, and we've got the referral coming up.
So this one comes up at council all the time,
Yes.
isn't it? And it's the one thing where my eyes usually roll to the back of my head. I really don't understand this bit. So this is something where I would really appreciate a bit of education.
No one quite understands how it became such a big thing. I think it's that neither the profession nor the EPO, for maybe slightly overlapping reasons, don't quite understand why it got where it got. Because the basics are fairly simple, which is that when you get your patent granted, sorry, doing Steve's bit, you give you your perspective. When you get patent granted, you want to make sure that the description of the claims are at some level consistent. Huge debate about what that means. And I think, Steve, as you very generously said, some discrepancy between treatment of that. And I think that's where the problem came from. So I think there's a recognition that has changed there. I think when I was doing the guidelines of the EPO, they were very receptive to the conversation. It's difficult to make the change. Because I was going to ask you, it's going up to the enlarged board now, so that's going to be interesting.
Yeah, as you said, I think the issue for me, because this used to come up again, as Lee said, it was the one issue you could guarantee that if I said, what about quality? People would say, you shouldn't be bringing the description into line with the claims. To which my response always was, that's not a quality issue because it's in the guidelines. And so, the examiners are applying the guidelines. And of course, then there was always the odd Board of Appeal decision, which said you shouldn't do it or didn't need to do it. And then there were others that said you should. So the work that was done on the guidelines was really useful in establishing what the current practice is. And then that work that we did last year was really to make sure that everyone was applying that consistently, not accepting insofar as the claims differ from the description, then it's the claims. No, you needed to actually change the description. Of course, with the reference to the enlarged Board of Appeal, that will bring that clarity. And I think that will be welcome for everyone because then, as the examiners, we can really focus on making sure we're applying whatever that case law says. And equally, then it's a very clear steer for applicants. Of course, it'd be really interesting as well to see any observations which come in on that. I'm sure there'll be a lot of observations coming in.
Our tentative seat will be clamouring to write out.
I can see it. Yeah. PATCOM are going to I'll be back. Deal like this.
I don't think it's. To be honest, I think the real fuss has been more about the hassle factor and potentially adding a little bit of unnecessary costs to the whole proceedings, that kind of thing. But it's good to see this going up actually, because I think it's quite a lot. When it takes a lot to get it to the enlarged board, but public interest is part of that, So
we're also, we're also very aware of the external aspects. I know particularly I think you all know better than me, but for American clients, it's seen as being something which could be used against them in other jurisdictions. So, we do appreciate the importance that people put on this. Like I said, what we're trying to do is to apply the case law as consistently as possible.
So this is a patent attorney-tastic session. Because I know there's about clarity, which is your third one you mentioned. And that's an interesting one because, again, roughly speaking, then if I did that on my hearing, but it's I tell you, well, I'm not being patronising.
No, patronise life. I'm used to it.
Not intentionally. It's what I would describe it as making sure the right things go in the claim, not too much, not too little. Beyond the inventiveness, there's other things that go in, and there's always a debate. I would say, again, it's anecdotal.
So getting rid of the flowery stuff, mate.
Get rid of the flowery stuff and making sure the claim makes sense.
Yeah.
And in my simplistic terms, actually, making sure that when you assert your claim, someone else can read the claim and work out whether or not it applies to them. Which I think the test I actually would roll out in the end about trying to work it out. If someone could read this, look at their products and decide if it infringes, it's probably doing that bit of its job. Anyway, I do find that that's an area where you do get differential treatment. That's great news because I think sometimes you mentioned the drafting thing, and it is a drafting thing, but the thought processes we go through, maybe we should share them more. Not per case, but on the training level. I do sometimes think we're trying to teach what we do as sort of patent drafters. It's such a weird, dark art. It really is funny. And I think sometimes we understand what we know. We know we've got the right stuff in, but we're hard to explain why. It just is.
It's that difficult. I think the patent examiner role, indeed the role of any patent office, is to find that golden thread of quality. Because if we restrict down too much, that's wrong.
Mm-hmm.
We should give the correct scope of the invention to protect what's novel in the invention. Equally, if we don't restrict down enough, you almost sometimes have the applicant saying, "Oh, but I thought you'd restrict me more." So again, you're obviously drafting a specification where you think maybe this will go through, maybe I'll get restricted down.
Yeah.
And so it is a very, very fine line. And I think that's one of the elements as well that I think will come out from the clarity workshop is obviously certain terms which might be clear in some technical fields aren't in others. So I do think this will be something where a workshop with industry will be really useful. Again, then we can start looking at our practice on clarity again to make sure that's consistent across the teams. Because that was one of the elements that came out from the conversations was the consistent approach of the EPC. I think people really value the guidelines, they value the consistent interpretation of the guidelines. And so we developed a new dashboard so you can actually see the sort of propensity of the different examiners to raise different objections, to call to oral proceedings. We also did the same for applicants, so we can see the sort of propensity of the applicant to make errors in particular areas. And then in those meetings we have, they've been really useful. We show the applicant where they fall. We show them a scatter graph of applicants from their particular technology field. And we show maybe where they have a few more non-unity objections, a few more clarity objections, and we can work with them on that as well.
That's not public?
No, we don't make that public. We have a private conversation. We anonymize the other applicants, so we show them as a red dot on the scatter graph. And then we anonymize probably about 10 applicants from their technology field so they can see where they're falling. And we look at their grant rates, we look at their objection rates, which vary hugely. Grant rates from 15% to 100%. And obviously objection rates also vary.
Again, that consistency over 100,000 granted patents, and the 200,000 filings altogether last year, I saw somewhere.
Yeah.
There's a big out. 4,500. How many examiners have you got now?
4,000.
Yeah. So getting that consistency perfect. Because the guidelines is a humongous tome. It's amazing that it's possible to interpret it in two different ways, but we're good at it.
I think with the consistency, we spoke about the new ways of working. We now have, whereas before teams would tend to work together, so you'd have the division of 3 all coming from the same team. And of course, then we had teams in Berlin, teams in Munich, teams in The Hague. It's quite natural that their practice would change slightly because the 3 of us, for example, would be a division consistently. And therefore, we would establish a practice. What's clear to you becomes clear to me, whereas Munich colleagues might think differently. And now we're mixing those elements up. And the other really big thing that we've done recently, in November last year, was to activate that division of 3 at search stage. So the search and written opinion used to be primarily the job of one of the examiners. They would consult colleagues, but now routinely all 3 members of the division are involved at search stage. And we already see recirculation of files. So we already see that. And that was to really try and get the written opinion right. I spoke about that golden thread of quality. And in fact, our figures from our independent audit showed that actually we were being too strict in about 10% of cases. Okay. So we're trying to tackle that as well.
Sounds like the right thing, but potential efficiency issue. You've got all 3 involved early, or does it make savings later on? So,
Yeah, I think this is what we also saw. Obviously, with the written opinion, that really sets the tone for the examination.
Yeah.
And if maybe there's an invalid objection being raised, that you might push back on that, or you might accept it, and you might go off in a particular direction. Of course, then when it comes to the examination, that direction's already been set. So we do think that by investing up front, we can then obviously set the application up on a good path.
is that from on all cases?
Yeah.
And is it visible who the examining division has all looked at on the paper?
I don't know whether it's
I just
whether
want
it's
to-
externally, but
Just around the blue there, but
Yeah.
I think that's quite interesting. People to get a feel for the examining division early, I guess. Leo, this has been, as I say, a patent attorney task.
I know.
I'm
I'm saying in awe of the conversation.
going to hand back the accelerator, the clutch, the brakes, the steering wheel.
It's pretty great because I think we're coming.
Most of the
easy
brakes.
towards the end, aren't we?
Have the brakes.
So should I try and bring us to a close? Is that all right, Steve? Have you got anything more that you want to share with us? Are you sat there thinking, oh, why didn't they ask me that?
no, I think we had a really good conversation right across the board. The only thing I would say, don't forget that we're stopping faxes. So
Yes,
we'll
that's
be,
going to cause a revolution.
yeah. And also we're moving away from the old mailbox as well. I think 95% of our applicants are now on the new mailbox system, new MyEPO.
Yeah.
But if there are any members who are still lingering on the old system, time is ticking.
Yeah, I think it's funny how I remember going to meetings for at least 15 years saying, can we turn the fax machines off? We said, well, there might still be somebody using fax machine.
So when I first turned up at SEPA, I remember members used to come into the office to use the fax machine. I mean, we had to keep this thing sort of plugged in to a phone line just in case a member wanted to come in and fax the EPO.
It's no kind of the horror stories you tell to trainees about trying to file an application at 11:30 at night. 50 pages through and you'll say 49 pages received. You're like, I don't know which one didn't go. I've got to file the whole thing again. Horrible. Yeah.
So we normally end up with a sort of like a tangential question, don't we? But because it's been quite patent heavy.
Oh, you had lots of time to think about this.
I've had a lot of time to think, but I couldn't come up with a question that would work for all three of us.
Oh.
So if Steve will allow me, I'd like to ask you just a few of them.
Right, I'm ready.
Yeah, but I mean, you can always then respond with your own question if you so choose to do so. So I was quite interested by the fire engine thing.
Yeah.
And so I was trying to work an angle on that, and I couldn't really think of one other than to say to you, from your deep past of kind of all of the inventions that you've worked on, what's the one invention where when it first came to you, you went, how the hell am I going to do that?
Oh, it's actually not one that I did. It was one weirdly you ruminate on how you would do other people's inventions.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And it was actually I used to like swimming quite a lot, and you get your goggles. And for a long time, goggles were rubbish and let water, and there was a foam pad.
Yeah, that's what I'm referring to.
And now they've got the I won't know any brands, but the fancy ones, the kind of the rolled over rubber kind of seal that
A
works.
bit like the thing that's on the bottom of a shower screen.
Yes, I still don't know how you explain that. I just can't. I've never been able to get the wording right because I never quite worked out why they're so good. So there you go, goggles.
Goggles.
There you go.
Okay. So yeah, you can't ask me that question because it's not a word or anything.
That's true. What happened? So, what's your favourite invention you've had to deal with in your lengthy time?
I don't know really. I think when I first came into patents, all of the nappy cases were doing the rounds.
Yes.
All of those Perduse and Smith Klein, etc. And they still therefore hold a certain place in my heart. That when I remember turning up my first day in the office, and there was this huge paper file, obviously with samples. All strapped together with those nice bands that used to cut your fingers because you like stab your fingers on those bands, and then they all had to be prepared for the court, so they're relevant to your upcoming meeting. The various, I think it was Pumphrey, Mr. Pumphrey was hearing the case, and they were all being prepared because they'd gone all the way through the patent office and they were going up to the High Court. And I thought, wow, I've entered patent law, and it's all about nappies.
I did. Even I did some nappy cases. That's not obviously my area of expertise.
Just so I can say something at the end.
Yeah, Lee,
Can I tell you my favourite step ladder joke?
that's exactly what we want. Yeah.
Yeah. So when I was younger, I had a really, really lovely step ladder. I kind of used to, it was the most important thing in life because I never knew my real ladder.
Your ladder in law, your half ladder. I get it. What's your what's your favourite emergency vehicle?
Emergency vehicle.
I don't know. I do like the new Wizzy motorbike thing that we were working on with the Earthshot, where the air comes through the middle of the bike to reduce
That was amazing.
airflow.
Cool.
Yeah.
That was cool.
Yeah. So
That wasn't an emergency. That's just a vehicle.
but it was a police bike. Yeah.
Well, I actually did that podcast. Forgot about that. Sorry. Thank you.
Steve, thank you so much for joining us. And particularly thank you for coming in person and joining us. And hope you have a kind of lovely evening. Danny, hello. How are you? Yeah, a little voice in the background we got in there.
Has it been all right? Are you happy?
Are you happy? Yeah, nothing we need to cut. Squidham, just in closing then, you listen to a lot of podcasts, don't you? You're a bit of a podcast.
I do, yeah.
Do you ever feel inclined when you listen to a podcast to go and leave a little review because it was kind of so good that you thought other people would find this podcast if I leave a little review?
That's an overwhelming urge.
Yeah. Do it, listeners. Do it.